He aimed the rifle, but the cheetah didn't move. Instead, it looked right at him, eyes wide, trembling, almost pleading. That was the moment the hunter's finger froze on the trigger, because what happened next, no one in their right mind would believe. This is the true story of the day. A man went hunting in the Serengeti and came back a completely different person. The sun had only just broken over the horizon, spilling slow light across the savanna. The grass was still wet with dew, every blade catching gold in its trembling edge. Birds stirred awake, each one crying its own name to the empty air. The world looked peaceful, but peace is a thin skin, stretched over hunger, and Jonas Mbele knew hunger better than most. He was not a cruel man. He was a father, a provider, a man who'd grown up chasing shadows across these plains, learning which way the wind carries scent, which path leads to water, and how quickly a moment of mercy can become a mistake. The people in his village said the world had changed, but out here, nothing ever really did. His wife, Amali, had pressed his hands that morning before he left. Her eyes said what her lips could not. Their son, Lutho, was sick again, coughing so hard at night it woke the neighbors. The medicine at the trading post cost more than Jonas had seen in months. He'd hunted smaller game, he'd traded hides. But today, he needed something big. Something worth more than regret. He'd heard of a cheetah roaming near the dried riverbed. A young male, bold, too close to the goat herds. Farmers whispered that it was cursed, a spirit wearing fur, unafraid of man or fire. Jonas didn't believe in curses. He believed in survival. By mid-morning, he found the tracks. Light, graceful, barely pressing the dust. But there, unmistakably, the marks of speed itself. He followed them carefully, his rifle slung across his back, his snare coiled like a promise in his hands. He found a narrow trail between two thorn bushes, the perfect choke point for a running cat. He drove a stake deep, looped the wire, and brushed the dirt smooth again. Then he crouched in the grass and waited. The hours dragged. Cicadas screamed in the heat. Sweat crawled down his neck. He thought of his son's small hand clutching his finger. He thought of the smell of medicine. He thought of the silence that comes when a man runs out of choices. And then it happened. A sudden rustle, sharp and desperate. A snarl. The brush exploded. The cheetah was caught. Jonas leapt to his feet. The animal twisted and spun, its leg trapped in the wire. Eyes wide, muscles straining like coiled rope. It hissed, spat, tried to bite the snare. The wire cut deeper. Blood darkened the dust. Jonas raised his rifle. It would be quick. One pull and it would all be over. He aimed. But then something stopped him. The cheetah's body went still. It didn't fight anymore. It just stared, straight into him. Not wild, not empty. Something else. Something that felt like fear and trust and a strange kind of sorrow, all tangled together. Jonas frowned. He lowered the gun slightly, wiping sweat from his brow. The animal's chest heaved. Its mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just a soft tremor, like a cry swallowed before it's born. And then Jonas heard something else. A faint rustling from the bushes. He turned his head just a little, and saw two tiny shapes watching from the shadows. Cubs. They were so small they barely stood on their legs, eyes still that cloudy blue of newborns. They mewled, high and weak, calling for the mother caught in his snare. Jonas felt his heart twist. He hadn't noticed the tracks of the cubs before. He'd only seen what he wanted to see. Money, meat, medicine. The mother cheetah looked at him again. Her eyes flicked from him to the cubs and back. It wasn't anger. It was a question. He took a step back. The rifle felt heavy now, heavier than ever before. He could end her suffering. But what would happen to them? He thought of his son again. Sick, fragile, dependent. He'd once seen a lioness die defending her cubs. And afterward, the cubs simply lay beside her until the vultures came. He remembered their tiny bodies under the sun. He remembered promising himself he'd never watch something like that again. But what was he supposed to do? He couldn't feed his child with pity. He couldn't heal him with guilt. Jonas knelt beside the trapped cheetah. Her muscles quivered, ready to fight. But she didn't strike. She just breathed. Slow, waiting. His hands shook as he reached for the snare. The wire had cut deep. He hesitated, knife poised. And, in that heartbeat, the cheetah pressed her head against the dirt. Like a bow. Like she was begging. Jonas cut the wire. The tension snapped with a metallic scream, and the cheetah flinched, dragging her wounded leg free. She stumbled back, hissed, and for a second he thought she might attack. But she didn't. She turned, limped toward the bushes. The cubs ran to her, crying. She gathered them close, licking their heads, her sides rising and falling like waves after a storm. Jonas watched, frozen. Then she did something he would never forget. She looked back at him. Not just a glance. A stare that reached straight through the space between species. And then, slow and deliberate, she took one step toward him, then another, until she was close enough to touch. Jonas didn't breathe. The cheetah brushed her head lightly against his boot, just once, and then turned away, leading her cubs into the tall grass. The savanna swallowed them whole. The wind moved again, and the only sound left was the whisper of grass against his legs. Jonas stood there a long time, long enough for the sun to shift, long enough for the flies to come and go. He didn't move, didn't think, didn't even feel human. When he finally did move, it wasn't to reload. It was to pick up the snare and crush it under his heel. The wire bent, snapped, useless. He dropped the rifle next to it. The echo of metal on stone felt like the end of something sacred. That night he returned home empty-handed. His wife saw his face and said nothing. He sat beside his son's bed until the boy fell asleep, listening to each shallow breath. Then he whispered, "Not everything we kill saves us." The next morning he sold the rifle. He took the money, less than a single cheetah skin, and bought medicine instead. He never hunted again. Weeks passed. The savanna turned green with the coming rains. Jonas found himself walking the plains again, but this time with no weapon, no traps. He carried only a camera borrowed from a friend. He wanted to see the animals differently, not as things to take, but as things that had always been giving. He found the spot again near the dry riverbed. The grass had grown tall over the place where the trap once was. He knelt and touched the earth. Still stained faintly red. He closed his eyes. The wind picked up, and for a moment he swore he heard something moving fast through the grass. A blur. A streak of gold and shadow, and then silence. He smiled. "Run free," he whispered. Months later, word spread about Jonas Mbele, the hunter who became the protector. He started guiding tourists, not to show them trophies, but to teach them respect. He taught the children from nearby villages how to track animals without weapons, how to read the signs of the wild, like a language written in dust and footprints. Sometimes, at dusk, when the air turned purple and the horizon burned like a dying ember, he'd sit alone by his small campfire and tell the story of that day. The day a cheetah begged for her life, and, in doing so, gave him back his own. People didn't always believe him. They said animals don't beg, don't think, don't forgive. Jonas would just smile and look toward the horizon. "Then you haven't looked long enough," he'd say. One evening, just before the rains returned, Jonas heard laughter from the tourists, tense. The easy kind of laughter that comes when people feel safe. He stepped away from the light to breathe the dark air, to listen to the earth again. And somewhere out there, in the grass, a sound answered. A soft chirp, almost like a bird, but too low, too knowing. He turned his head. Two amber eyes caught the firelight for an instant, and then vanished. He didn't chase. He didn't call out. He just smiled and whispered into the wind, "I remember." Because deep down, he knew the wild keeps its own kind of memory. It remembers kindness as much as fear, and sometimes it returns to check if the lesson still holds. So if you ever travel across the Serengeti, and you meet an old man with a scar on his hand, and eyes that search the horizon more than your face, listen. He might tell you about the day he met a cheetah who changed him forever. And if the wind shifts just right, you might hear that same faint chirp in the distance. A mother calling, a promise kept, a ghost of mercy running free through the grass. Because the truth is simple. The hunter didn't save the cheetah that day. The cheetah saved him.